Thanks for joining today's CaFÉ webinar. Today we're going to be talking all about jury types. I'm going to tell you exactly what they are, how they work, and then we'll talk about how you can choose the best jury type for your call. So the key items that we'll cover today include an explanation of what jury types mean in CaFÉ and how they work. We'll go over the definitions of the scoring by art and scoring by application jury types. We will show you the applications and what they look like based on the jury type. We'll show you what they look like as an artist, administrator, and a juror. And I'm also going to talk about the special rules and considerations we have for each jury type to help you determine which one is best for you. In CaFÉ, there are two main jury types that will determine how the system handles the applications for your call. The reason it's such an important thing to pay attention to, and the reason we are dedicating a whole webinar to it, is because there are several things throughout your call's creation and collection of applications that are affected by it. In order to understand each jury type, I first want to explain exactly what jury types actually do in our system, so it's easier to understand how it's put into practice. The most simple way to explain it is that jury types dictate how the images entered by an artist are treated when they submit their application. And I think the best way to elaborate what I mean is to bring us back to basics and show you what it looks like when an artist applies to a call in CaFÉ. So let me go to our artist account. You can see I'm logged in here as an artist. You can see I have my portfolio. These are all the images of artwork that I have uploaded to my portfolio ahead of time. You can see I haven't applied to any calls yet, but we are going to in just a minute. So in addition to making the collection submissions process easier for you, the organizations, to collect entries and organize them, one of the primary goals for CaFÉ when making the platform was to make it easy for artists to apply to multiple calls for entry at once. Part of that meant making the application process for entering multiple pieces of artwork as streamlined as possible. So I'll show you what I mean when I go to apply to a call for entry. I'm going to grab one of our demo calls here. We'll go to this one first. So I've got this demo call here that is accepting up to 3 work samples from the artist. You can see here in our prospectus, this call is accepting 0 to 3. Well, this should actually be 1 minimum image, but overall 1 to 3 work samples. And let's say I'm an artist and I want to apply to this call with 3 different paintings in hopes that at least one of them will be chosen for exhibition. So to start off, I'm going to click Apply Now. I'll agree to this organization's terms and conditions to apply, and then I'll be taken to the application page. So all I need to do is fill out this question once, fill out the artist statement. I will answer these questions, and then I'll get to the work samples section, and all I need to do is select all of the paintings that I want to apply to this call for entry for once, all at once. So I've already uploaded these. These are from my portfolio like we saw before, and I'm just going to choose, 1, 2, 3 paintings to apply to this call. Then I'll just go ahead and save the application, verify my categories are correct for each work sample, click Save on that. Then I'm just going to check out. We've got this one here, going to proceed and submit my entry. And that's it. We'll go to my CaFÉ entries. This is where it lists all the entries that I've applied to or maybe started. And it's going to show here pretty plainly that we've applied to this call. And you can see the 3 art pieces that I submitted to this exhibition call. So pretty easy, right? Pretty straightforward. Now let's apply to a different call. I'm going to go back to my favorites, and I'm going to apply to this one. It's a sculpture exhibition call. This one's a little bit different, but as you'll see, the process will look almost identical. This call is asking for sculptures, and you can see here it's also asking for 1 to 3 work samples. But if I scroll down a little bit more, we have, a lot of default text here. This is just, for our demonstration, but let's say I'm an artist that actually reads the prospectus because, hopefully most do, but we all know not all of them do. But anyway, and I'll show you later how we can solve that problem a little bit. But I'm going to read the prospectus. I'm going to see this here where it says up to 3 sculptures may be entered, and then enter 1 to 3 images per sculpture. Each sculpture must be submitted as separate applications. So I can see here that they're asking me to upload 1 sculpture at a time, each with 1 to 3 images. And great, that's what I'm going to do. I have a sculpture and I'm going to have 1 to 3 images to show that sculpture with multiple views. So let me go ahead and apply. I'll agree to the terms. And once again, I'm just going to answer the questions. We'll have our category up here at the top. This case, it might be, the site location of the sculpture. Answer these questions. You'll see here, they've told me again, I have to upload up to 3 sculptures, but 1 to 3 images per sculpture. However, each sculpture must be submitted as separate applications. So there we go. I'm just going to take that info and come down here. Then I'll choose my work samples. I'm going to apply with this sculpture right here, which is shown via these 3 images, and I'll just select all of them. Then I'll click save. I can reorder them if I want to. This one's the full view, so I'm going to go ahead and switch those 2 and save that order. And then I'm going to check out, just like I did before. So again, that was pretty easy. Just had to answer some questions and upload the work samples. And I'm going to go to my CaFÉ entries page, and you can see that we've applied to this call. If I click review here, it shows all those images there. So you can see here that the entry is marked as received, but there's only 1. Here we've got 3, here we've got 1. And if I click on them, again, you can see each one of these, we have 1 work sample, but then this one, we have 3. And if I go back to the call here, I'm just going to click on the name of it to get back to this prospectus. You can see that it will allow me to apply again to this call. And maybe I have a second sculpture or third sculpture I want to submit, each with their own set of 1 to 3 images. So I would be able to do that. If I go to our other call here, that first one, you can see I've submitted those 3 entries and I can't apply anymore. So I know that might have been a pretty basic elementary way of showing you what it looks like to apply as an artist, although some folks don't, you might not have seen this process before, so hopefully that was helpful. But I wanted to point out that applying to a call for an artist, depending on the call, there might not be a whole lot of differences. And it's kind of designed to make it pretty streamlined and easy for an artist to answer the application questions and upload as many work samples as they need, so long as it's pertaining to what the organization asked for. So as you probably guessed, I didn't really mention how each example call has a different jury type, but the reality is artists don't know what jury types are and they don't see that on the front end. So it doesn't really matter to them, but it matters a lot to you. You might have just noticed a few differences here and there, as I kind of explained at the end, and we'll go through what those differences are. So I just want to show you what it looked like to the artist side. Now we'll go behind the curtain a little bit and talk about what the jury types are and what is happening as my artist account was applying to these calls. Before I jump to the administrator side of CaFÉ, I will show you the definitions for each jury type. The first jury type we have, which is the first call we applied to, was called scoring by art. This means that applications are reviewed and scored based on individual pieces of artwork. This jury type allows artists to apply once with as many media samples or as many artwork as allowed. And all of these media files, this is the important part, are separated into individual applications once submitted. So you can see this back on my CaFÉ entries page. Once I submitted all 3 images, they were broken out into 3 separate applications. And I know this because I can clearly see it on this page where I have each work sample separated. If I click on review next to any of them, it's just including that 1 work sample. You can see though that we have all these application questions, which if I click on a different work sample, all those application questions will be the same since they only entered it once. Same goes for all of the artist information. It'll all be copied over for each application. And then the second call we applied to has the jury type called scoring by application. The definition of scoring by application is that applications are reviewed and scored based on a body of work. This jury type allows artists to submit as many media samples as allowed. And again, the important part in this case, all media files will be combined into one application. So again, from the artist side, we can take a look. We've got that one application and all work samples are combined into this one entry. And we have a question in the chat. What's the difference between image and work sample? You'll have to forgive me for interchanging them a lot today. But in order to describe this process as simple as possible, it's the same thing. So image and work sample. Basically in CaFÉ, we have the ability to upload as images, audios, and video files. And so, an image is a work sample, an audio is a work sample, and a video is a work sample. But today we're just going to be talking about images. So I might interchange the name work sample and image, but it's just used to describe one of these portfolio files. Let's now compare these on the administrator side. So I'm going to go to admin page. We're logged in here already into CaFÉ. And to view the applications, we're going to go to events on the side and then management, which is where we are here. And I'm going to choose the call from the drop-down menu. We'll start with this one again. The applications by status table will pull up here, and I'm going to click on the received status. That's where all the applications that have been entered are listed. And you'll see the list of the applications down below. So let's look for the one I just submitted here. It's under this demo Justine name here. As you can see, there's my name and it's listed 3 times, one for each of the 3 paintings I entered. Looks pretty similar to how it looks on the artist side. And if I click on my app ID number, I will pull up the application page and you can see here we've got those same application questions. And then of course that one work sample for this particular entry. I can then click to view the next one and you'll see it's the same information, but then the next work sample and the same will happen for the 3rd painting. We have more information and more webinar topics about viewing applications and organizing them. So I'm not going to talk too much about this page, but I just wanted to point out that, it kind of looks similar to how we were reviewing it on the artist side, where each image, aka work sample, is separated into separate applications. If I go back to the application list, I'll point out one other thing that you'll notice here. You'll see that there's only one set of transaction details per artist name. So we've got this artist at the top, and they then have, one copy. We have this transaction detail that we just did today with 2 additional copies, and then same for this 3rd artist here. This is to show that the artist just made that one transaction and submitted it once, and then each subsequent entry shows that it was additional images that were separated out into individual entries. So this is kind of one way to visually see how many entries were submitted by the artist. I can see that, Katie Romano here submitted once, and they have 1, 2, 3 entries. You'll also notice at the top of this table, it'll tell you how many entries versus how many artists. So we have 8 total entries, but from 3 total unique artists listed here. So you'll typically see a smaller number of artists than entries. If we look at the other scoring by application call here, I'll click on the receive status to pull up the list of those applications. You'll see here that we've got each application, and then there's only 1 per artist, with one exception I'll say in a minute. If I click on the app ID number, this is the one that we applied to today. You can see here on the application page that all of the images are combined into this one application. Now here's where I'm going to make a distinction where I've been using this call as an example of a sculpture call where there's multiple images representing one sculpture, and therefore our scoring by application jury type helps us keep these images grouped together so it's clear that they're all of the same sculpture. Now, scoring by application calls can and most often are used for other kinds of submissions. A lot of times it's used for things like public art requests for qualifications, scholarship applications, residency applications, etc. When an artist applies to these kinds of calls, they're submitting images that show off their body of work or their portfolio. And since the individual artwork isn't being scored, but their portfolio is, those images do need to be grouped together like we're seeing here so that they can receive one score for the entire body of work and not separate scores on their separate images. So that's why scoring by application is needed. On this application, though, for a sculpture call, instead of it being a body of work, we're just saying we need to group these images together because they're depicting the same sculpture, and we want to give the sculpture one score and not each individual detail view one score. So I just want to make that distinction here. The sculpture example we're using today is sort of like an exception to the rule, but I wanted to start off with it because I think it's a pretty standard way for a sculpture call to be used if you need multiple images. And I think it's a great way to show how this process works. Now let's talk about that exception of having multiple applications for one artist. And that's because if you recall, this sculpture call is accepting up to 3 sculptures. So in addition to accepting 3 images per sculpture, they can submit up to 3 separate sculptures. So in this call, they've allowed an artist to submit up to 3 sculptures, and therefore we have an artist here, Katie Romano, who applied twice, each with a separate sculpture. This is kind of a way to show that you can allow multiple applications, each containing their own set of images. You can see here too that our top totals here will describe a little bit how we have total number of entries, which may be higher than the total number of unique artists that have applied to the call. And I'll show you a little later how we can set up that setting to allow an artist to apply multiple times. Okay, on this application list, you'll see here we have 1 transaction details per time an artist applies. Like I said, you can apply multiple times. So each timestamp will kind of show when an artist applied, and their transaction numbers will be different if they applied multiple times. That was a little bit about what the administrator, sees. Now let's go into the juror side. The concept of jury types is aptly named because not only do they dictate how images are separated or not when submitted, the important thing is that they dictate just how the applications are scored by the jury, hence the name jury type. Once I've logged in here, I'm going to start with the scoring by art call as we've done previously. And I'm going to pull up the applications and the scorecard for the first entry. So I'm going to click on the total number of applications, and this is going to open up a pop-up window, as you can see here, of the first entry that we have. We have a jury webinar that goes into how to view all these things and how to use the scorecard. So look out for that. We'll also be conducting a new one relatively soon. So be on the lookout. Real quickly, though, because we had that question, I can just kind of show you if you click on the work sample as a juror, this is how you view the enlarged image. And then you can close out. It'll be in a separate window, and then you can close out that separate window to come back to the scorecard. Like we've seen before, this first entry shows just 1 image of 1 piece of artwork, and I can give it 1 score. You say, this is my score here, and I can put in any comments for this painting. And then I can review those application answers by clicking View Form Answers, and it'll be listed there. When I'm ready, I can click Save My Score, and it'll take me to the next one. This one, since we don't have a blind jury, you can see it's the same name, and we just have all the same information, same answers to the work sample or applications, and then the work sample is just the only thing that's different. And here I can view the work sample again and give this one a different score, put in any comments for this piece, and continue on. These are ordered to list the same artists in a row because my default as an administrator, I set it up to sort it by artist last name. But if you're conducting a blind jury, or if you just want to shuffle it up a little bit more, you can have it sort randomly, which is a setting you can do on the jury administration page. Just set up your scorecard sort to random, click randomize, and it will jumble up all these artworks so that they're not side by side. Or if you prefer them side by side, so your juror can only choose 1 per artist, you can do that as well. Like I said, we can score, 1 score per artwork. On the other hand, let's switch to our sculpture exhibition call. This is the jury type with scoring by application. Again, I'll click on the total to bring up our scorecard. And just like we saw before, you can see here that we have the 3 images combined into 1. I can click to view the application answers. I can click to view the work samples. If I enlarge the work sample, I can then click next to view the next image in this application. It's only going to show me, those 3. When I'm done, I can remove it. And then I will give my 1 score to, and any comments to this one application or to this one sculpture. I can't go in and individually score each, artwork. I can only give this 1 score to this application. I know that was kind of brief and quick, but I just kind of wanted to show you how it looked like to the jury side, and show you a little bit like that. So we've now seen it as an artist, as an administrator, and as a juror. I want to take us backwards a little bit just to show you how to set up certain things for your jury type. So hopefully with the information I've given so far, you understand the differences in how they display the work samples and can maybe identify which jury type is right for your call. It's important to understand this all because there are certain limitations within each of the settings and within the jury type that cannot be changed after your call opens. So when you first request your call by filling out this is that new call request form. We're a couple pages into it already, but this is what you fill out every time you need to start a new call. And we ask for the basic information of your call, including the name of it, the entry fee information, how many work samples you're accepting, and the jury type. So as you can see here, we've got our jury type question. And so it's going to list the 2 types, scoring by application, scoring by art. We have a quick definition of each one here, and hopefully that allows you to figure out which one is the one that you need. And we have a reminder that it can't be changed after it opens. So just be sure, if you have any questions about which one to pick, feel free to ask us before you fill out this form. If you need a little bit extra refresher on what this means, not only could you come back and look at this webinar, but you could go to that help center that we were at before. And we have a jury types help guide. This can be accessed by clicking on Help Center when you're logged into CaFÉ. And if you go to jury types, we have those 2 definitions here. We also have a lot more information about what we're talking about today. So back to the form, once you fill this out, just choose the one you're ready to go with, and we will set up your call to be set to this jury type. And let's go into our call. I'll go to events and management, and we're just going to go ahead and choose, again, our scoring by art one first, and I'll go into the call editor. So like I said, once you fill out that form, we'll set the call to the jury type that you asked for. If you do need to change it before your call goes live, no problem. Just, contact us and we can change it over for you. We might ask you a couple questions just to ensure that you know which one you actually need and we don't set up the wrong one. And also we ask that you check to make sure the jury type is selected, and I'll show you where to find it. Make sure you have the right one. And if it's incorrectly set up by, the staff member who created this call type for you, just ask us to change it. It's up to you to verify all of this information in CaFÉ is correct. On the event information tab, which is where we are now, if you scroll down just a little bit, almost to the bottom, you can see here on the right-hand side, we have our jury type section. This is where you'll want to double check to make sure that it matches what you've entered on the call form and is set to that one that you actually need your call to be. And like I said, if you need to edit it, just contact us and we can change it for you. So you can see here with this first call, we have the scoring by art type, which means each image will be scored independently. If I go to our scoring by application call, it just takes a few clicks to get there. Back to our call editor. And I scroll down, you can see here, jury type, scoring by application, all uploads scored as a group. Now here is where you can see that you can increase the number of applications allowed per applicant. So this means the number of times an artist can go back and submit with a brand new application. With scoring by art calls, as you saw, there was not an option like this available because the idea from the beginning is that artists only need to apply to the call once, and once with all the artwork that they're entering, they do it all at the same time, and there's no need to go back and apply with multiple applications. That means that one of our rules for this is that there's not actually a way for the artist to go back and submit to the call a second time. Maybe they entered one painting and they decide they want to enter a second one. They won't actually be allowed to do this. And that means because of how the jury types work, it's just how our system is set up to say, the artist is applying, they're counting the number of images an artist is uploading and saying, okay, that's the number of entries you have. And I'll talk a little bit about another thing later on that kind of affects this in a way that really makes it so that it's kind of impossible for an artist to go back. I'll touch on that later. It has to do with entry fees, but I'll talk a little bit about that too. I'll also mention on this page that in your call details, it's going to be a great idea, like I said before, to have information, especially if you have a call that is scoring by application, to describe what you're looking for per application. So for here in the sculpture call, we're going to require multiple images of one sculpture at a time. So, if you allow the artist to submit up to 3 sculptures and 1 to 3 images of each sculpture, you'll want to first be sure that your number of applications allowed is 3, so they can submit up to 3 sculptures. And then describing your call details that an artist must apply with 1 to 3 images per sculpture. And then if they want to submit additional entries, they must return to the call and apply separately, 1 for each sculpture. So having this information here will ensure that they're submitting their applications correctly. Sometimes they don't do that, but if you have the information here pretty plainly and somewhere else that I'll mention next, you should be in pretty good shape for artists to submit their applications correctly. Let's now check on the application editor, which is the next tab over, and we'll check on this work sample requirement section. So here, the minimum number of images, and then if you have video or audio too, is listed along with the overall number of work samples or total media. So this one's only accepting images, and overall, it's accepting the same. But if you do allow audio or video files to be accepted, you will have audio listed here and video as well. And then your total media will kind of be that overall number of work samples, any combination of image, audio, or video that is allowed to be submitted. Here on our scoring by application call, we'll just want to make sure that this number here reflects the number of images we're allowing per application. So 1 to 3 images per sculpture. We wouldn't want to set it to, for example, 1 to 9. If you're thinking, if someone submits 3 sculptures, they're going to have 3 images of each and then therefore need 9 work samples. That's not the case because we're separating out each application by sculpture. So we just need to indicate how many work samples we're allowing per sculpture. And then also on the application editor tab is where we can build out any, the categories. Or what I want to talk about is the form questions. These are the application questions that the artist fills out. And you will see here, I have this informational only question. And if I go in and click edit, it's going to say, since this is an actual question, it's just information only. This is information that will display on the application itself as the artist is filling out the questions. Right before they enter their work samples, they will come to this and they will see the same information that you put on your call form, or maybe you have some little bit more info for them. But I do recommend putting this information on your application so artists will see it right in their view as they're submitting, to ensure that they have the correct formatting of their images and that they're only submitting however many images for whatever you're accepting at the time. So you can build this under the information only question type in the application editor. Let's now jump real quick to the product editor to go over some other major differences between the jury types. And I'll switch back to, we're on our scoring. Yeah, I'll switch back to our scoring by art call. All right, back to the product editor. As you know, scoring by art is allowing you to jury individual pieces of artwork. You may allow any number of artworks per artist, up to 20, which is the max number of media files you can accept per artist in the system. That's just not to overload our system with too many work samples. Each image of that piece with the scoring by art jury type will become its own entry. And as most of you may know, some organizations like to charge the entry fees based on the number of works being submitted. So in addition to setting up a base entry fee like we have here, which for our example, I'm going to change our base entry fee to $10. So let's say we have a $10 entry fee. If I just have this base entry fee like we have here, this means the artist is going to pay $10 no matter how many images they submit within your media requirements. So in this one, we could submit 1, 2, or 3 images, and no matter how many they submit, they will just be charged that $10. However, if you do want to charge per entry, or maybe you have, you want to charge for the first 2 entries and each additional will be, in another fee. That's where the additional media fee comes in. The additional media fee is only available to scoring by art calls, and that's because the system is counting the number of work samples that the artist is submitting and can therefore apply a different fee to a different set of work samples or different number of work samples. So if you want to add an additional media fee, basically what you'll do is you'll set the number under cost for what that additional fee will be. You can add a description, additional media fee here, and you're going to choose this media fee type. So this is only available for scoring by art calls. So media fee, and we'll go ahead and add it. So what we have here is that we have this $10 base entry fee and then this $5 media fee. So the $5 media fee will be charged to each additional work sample submitted above the minimum. If I click preview fees here, it kind of shows me my media requirements next to my entry fees and my media fees. So this kind of helps to kind of show here. So we have total media. So this is what the system's going to be looking at. It's going to say, okay, you have one minimum work sample allowed, and that $10 entry fee is going to be charged. So we've got, if an artist submits 1, they're going to be charged $10. And then if an artist submits 2, they're going to be charged the $10 plus $5. And so the media fee will be charged for each additional. So it'll be $5 for 1 additional if they submit 2, and then therefore their total will be $15. If they submit 3, it's going to charge $10 and then 2 $5 media fees because they're submitting 3 total. And then they'll be charged $20 for those 3 entries. If you change the medium minimum, maybe your minimum is 2 and the $10 will count towards 2 entries, then you can set your minimum to 2. And if an artist applies with more than 2, will they be applied or charged that additional media fee. So we also have some other help resources about setting up fees and things like that. And if you need help with us, feel free to contact us. I'm not going to go too much more into the nuances of this since we're just talking about jury types, but I just wanted to show how the jury type can also affect how your fee structure works. So if you want to be able to charge additional media fees based on the number of work samples they're submitting, you have to be in the scoring by art jury type. And this kind of also explains what I talked about before with artists not being able to return and submit separate paintings or separate images after they've already applied to a scoring by art call. And that's because the system will have already determined how many against the minimum and maximums, how many entries they've submitted, and they can't go back and change that, or else they'd be changing up the number, however many entry fees they must be paying. And we'll talk about it again, but there's a workaround to be able to just create a separate CaFÉ account and apply to the call again if they need to submit an additional painting once they've already submitted. So that's just kind of a long way of saying there's a reason why things are like the way they are. The last thing I want to talk about today is some other rules and conditions that you should be aware of for each jury type. We've already touched on some of them, but I'm going to show you a comparison between each of them so it's kind of more clearly spelled out for you. So we'll start by talking about the number of times an artist can go back and apply to the call, like we have just been talking about. We've already talked about this. So scoring by art calls, the artist can only apply to the call once. And by artist, I mean one artist account can only apply to your call once. They determine how many paintings or how many artworks or how many images they're applying to your call, and they do it all at the same time. They check off all the pieces that they want to submit at the same time. And once they submit and pay their entry fee, even if you don't have an entry fee, if they submit it, that's it. They're done. They're locked to that number of work samples that they've submitted. They're tied to the number of entry fees and media fees. So that's why we have it the way it is, because the system is calculating it. So, again, artists can only apply to a scoring by art call once. With scoring by application calls, as you saw, you can set the number of times an artist can go back and apply to the call. So there's that number of applications allowed per setting, and it's in the event information tab. This is not the correct call, but it'll be listed in that jury type section here. And with that just determines the number of times a specific artist account can go back and apply again to the call. As you can see on if I just log back in real quick to the artist side, This is that scoring by application call. We have number of applications allowed. It's 3 here. And as you can see, an artist can go back and apply again to the call. Once they've submitted 3 in this particular call, that apply again call button won't be available to them since they've reached their max. Along those lines is our next rule, which is that in scoring by art calls, an artist may not add or remove work samples from their application. If allowed, artists may only swap work samples one for one. Let's say someone needs to make an edit to their call. They will ask you to put them into the incomplete status if it's before the deadline, or if it's after the deadline, you'll put them in the exception status. That's going to allow them to go back to their entries here, and they'll have that modify option. So if their status is in incomplete or exception, they should have that modify button. They can go in and they can edit their application questions. They can edit their artist statement, but depending on their jury type, they may or may not be able to edit the number of work samples that are in their call. If it's a scoring by art call, they will only be allowed to swap out images one for one. So if I have 3 images, I can then swap out for 3 separate images, or maybe just swap out one of the images, but I won't be able to go down to 2, and I won't be able to add any additional. And that's because, like I said before, when you're scoring by art call, you're locked to the number of submissions that you've entered at a specific time when you submitted that entry. You can always, if an artist wants to withdraw one of their entries, you as the administrator can simply put that specific entry in the withdrawn status, and it's up to you to refund as needed. Or if they need to add additional entries, the workaround is creating a whole separate CaFÉ account and applying with that additional piece or pieces to the call. They will just be subject to that entry fee again. So it's up to you to either waive that for them or have them pay it again because they didn't submit it originally. With scoring by application calls, artists may go back and they may add or remove work samples from their application. So again, let's say I'm an artist. I want to go in and add some work to my, maybe I have additional detail images, even though my max for this specific call is 3 images, but let's say there was more, I could add additional images. Let's say I wanted to take one of these detail images out. I could do that. I could also, if it's more of a portfolio call and I wanted to swap out images or change them, I can certainly do that too. So with scoring by application calls, they can edit however many work samples they have, as long as it's within the work sample requirements set up for that specific call. So it's not saying that they can go in and add additional if you're not allowing, more than 3, they can only submit 3. But they do have that editing capability because it's all just combined into one, and the system doesn't really care because you're not really changing the specific, to be really technical, you're not changing or creating or removing application ID numbers. As with scoring by art calls, each image therefore then has its own application ID number since it's separated out. With scoring by application calls, it's just one application ID number and the images can be added or removed. Final rule is that, kind of on the same lines, scoring by art calls, artists may not order the work samples. And that's just because since the images or work samples, same thing, since they're going to be separated out into separate applications, it doesn't matter what order they're in when they submit it. It'll all just kind of be separated. And with scoring by application calls, artists can go in and reorder how the work samples appear. If you recall, when I first applied to our sculpture call, I was able to kind of edit the order, and that just kind of shows that, like, if a juror was going to view a slideshow of my images, it'll be in the order I want them to be in. Maybe with the sculpture starting with the full view and then displaying the details. So that's just one other thing that allows. So, while this side here looks a lot of like no's and this one's like, oh yeah, you can kind of do all these things. That's not to say that scoring by application is better. It's just different because it just operates differently. And so with scoring by art calls, even though there's some restrictions to how artists submit and how they may be able to edit, it's kind of just the original way that CaFÉ was set up to say, hey, if you're an artist and you want to apply to 3 entries, you only have to fill out the application once, but you can put in as many entries as allowed, and you can do it all in one swoop. You are kind of more restricted once you do that because you've made your decision. But like I said, it's just kind of how it's working in the system in the back end that, determines what is and isn't allowed. I just want to go over quickly some tips to close us out for the jury types. My first is just be sure to preview your application before publishing your call. In addition to making sure you have the correct jury type selected, if you go and click the preview call button, when you're on the event information tab, you'll be displayed your prospectus as it, appears to the artist. That call detail page, if you're on the application editor, if you click preview call, you can, I'm logged in here real quick. Now, if I click preview call, you can view the application as it will appear to the artist, and you can make sure you have, the correct information on the application. If you want to build out additional information only question types, you can kind of see what that'll look like to the artist and say, okay, this looks like pretty clear if I'm an artist that I can only apply with X number of work samples, and I have to either go back and add, or I can't. You can preview your call to make sure it's intuitive to an artist. My next tip is to monitor the applications as they're submitted. So just as we did earlier on, if I go to my events management page, and if I click on received, when I first launch my call and start accepting applications, I can come in here and just kind of see, all right, it looks like I have all these applications and they look like they're being separated per entry. So that's good. If in this case, I want to make sure that every image will receive a separate score. And so I want it to be separated out like that. And you can kind of just see that that matches what you actually need. And similar, if you're in the scoring by application call, you can say, okay, it looks like we have transaction details on every line here, which tells me it's the scoring by application, and each application contains all of the images an artist submitted. And that just kind of helps you say, let's say it doesn't look the way you want it to look. While we can't typically change the jury type after a call is submitted, if you catch it early on, which is why I ask you to monitor it when you first launch your call, if you catch it early on, there's some little tricks that we can do on the back end to switch your jury type, but it's kind of a difficult process. So we'd prefer not to have to do that, since there's a couple other things that you'd have to work around if that happens. But if it has to happen, then we'd rather it be caught early on. And then my other tip is, if you don't know which jury type to pick, if this whole entire hour was confusing to you, that's okay. You can just ask us. You can kind of just tell a member of our team, I'm looking to host a call where artists submit XYZ and jurors score in this sense. Or we're looking for sculptures, but I need multiple images per sculptures. Or, we're just doing a regular exhibition. I forget which one that should be. And we'll just kind of remind you and help you. So if you're struggling, we'd rather you have the correct one and ask us than have you have the wrong one. And if you need to reach out to us, that's our email there. That's my tips for jury types. This concludes our webinars of Jury Types 101. And I hope you all have a better understanding of how jury types work and how each one is used. Thanks for joining us. Be sure to join our next webinar next month.